Some of my earliest gaming memories involve my brothers and I taking hourly turns with our dad's PS1. Each one of us would have a game we'd play, and for a section of time, each of those games was a different JRPG. The genre JRPG came up in the headlines towards the beginning of 2023 when Ralph from Skill Up mentioned it in front of Naoki Yoshida, who said that he didn't really like the term. Since then, there's been a lot of discussion in the industry about the term, with others like Hideki Kamiya weighing in saying he likes the term. I'm only bringing up the contentious discourse around the term relative to 2023 because I've found that within gaming discourse in general, most genre descriptors are contested. People define genres differently from one another, and I think part of the reason that this is because we don't have a unified gaming genre dictionary or anything like that. Genres are a tricky business since games can be multiple genres at once, and we describe them that way even though I think each game should only be described by what it is primarily. And that's why I need to define what I mean by JRPG before we dive deeper into why it is that I think JRPGs are no longer popular. I define JRPG as being a game that must have a few specific features with a few other features being optional. The features that must be in a JRPG are a setting that functions as a character, a cast of characters that are most of the time set in stone, and a long story. Most of the time, JRPGs have turn-based combat, but this feature has changed from a necessity to a negotiable characteristic since the early 90s, so it's not really a new thing, but the Mana series really pioneered the idea of the action JRPG. JRPGs typically have an anime style, and sometimes the characters fall into anime archetypes. And finally, and this section applies to each genre relative to itself, JRPGs have a certain vibe, and there's no better way I can describe it. A word to my knowledge doesn't exist in the English language. The ambiance of each genre is partly what makes it clear what that genre is, and most of the time that's easy to do with JRPGs. There are four major reasons why I think JRPGs are not so popular anymore, and they are the quote-unquote boring gameplay, reading, the anime aspects of the art direction, and its golden age has long since passed. I don't personally think these features are bad things, but they are the aspects that I feel make some people uninterested in the genre as a whole. Anime is far more popular than it has ever been, and we're living in an age where body pillows are far more common and VTubers exist. Yet I think the anime aspects of JRPGs are part of the reason they're less popular than they could be. Since a major feature of a JRPG is the story, and since those stories need to be good and invest the player in the characters and the plot, anything that makes the story less interesting hurts the overall game. It's hard to take stories seriously if they're too anime, in my opinion. This wasn't always an issue though, and when the genre was in its prime in the 90s, the anime nature of the characters were kind of novel, and therefore it didn't really create a problem. Voice acting, I feel, is the worst aspect of the typical anime style, specifically because I've always found anime voice acting to be pretty low quality, and that really transfers over into the video game market as well. Anime archetypes are also a problem since they get very samey very quick. I could tell you very quickly on in any anime what type of character a certain character is going to be based off of the first sentence that they say, and there's very few cases where that does not hold true. That gets very repetitive very quickly, and it really shows up in video games as well, and I think it really hurts the story aspect of a JRPG. Reading lessens the awkwardness of anime writing since it allows the audience to put their own inflections upon the characters' lines, changing their meanings in subtle ways. That's why JRPGs without voice acting age better, I think, and reading is a constant feature in them. Even modern JRPGs sometimes favor reading over voice acting, such as the Persona series or Dragon Quest XI, and I really think it helps these games because it makes them more fun to play through. Reading requires effort though, and anything that requires effort is going to make it less popular. Reading takes time, and it requires reading comprehension. I teach English at the high school level, so I know for a fact that most people are borderline illiterate by the time they leave high school, meaning that since JRPGs sometimes require basic or extreme competency in reading and comprehension, they are bound to lose some people within the first few minutes of the game. This isn't helped by the fact JRPGs are slow burns a lot of the time, making them difficult to get into for someone who doesn't like to read. JRPGs are the book genre of gaming, besides visual novels anyway, and we all know that books make up a small sliver of cultural significance at the mass media scale. Exacerbating the slow nature of JRPGs, they typically have quote-unquote boring gameplay. I personally don't find turn-based random encounter gameplay boring, but most gamers do if we juxtapose sales differentials between action-heavy games and turn-based ones. I go out of my way to find experiences that make me think about things, and I do this with all of my media interests, from the books I read, the movies I watch, and the games I play. But most people aren't looking for things that make them think, because media consumption is all about fun, and thinking is the antithesis of fun for many. Some games have sought to rectify this issue by adding action elements to the classic turn-based JRPG formula. Those games are things like Super Mario RPG, The Legend of Dragoon, Sea of Stars, and others. These games do a great job at branching the gap between players who can't stand turn-based gameplay and their willingness to try out a JRPG. Now, I'm someone who likes all of the subclassifications of JRPGs, from turn-based to action-heavy to blended to strategy. I think that these types of systems work pretty well at making the genre more palatable. But even this change isn't enough for the vast majority of people. Think about the way Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy XVI have moved the Final Fantasy franchise, one of the main original pillars of the JRPG genre, from its earliest inception, away from the hallmark characteristics of that genre, so much so that I would not call either of these Final Fantasy titles JRPGs at all. And as companies move away from what used to be a huge prominent genre, JRPGs begin to go the way of the mammoth, slow and steadily towards their extinction. They're not close to that extinction yet, living on the life support of indies and a few other brave studios, but I don't know if the genre will survive for the length of my life. Part of the reason is that all of the greatest JRPGs are old. This contentious statement is going to draw a lot of ire from Persona 5 and Dragon Quest XI fans, but the fact that I only mentioned two major industry hits in the genre in the last 10 years should be telling enough. In the 90s, great genre-defining JRPGs were coming out every few months, and now there's just a constant drought. New games don't redefine the genre, and when they do, they come out too sparsely to matter for the longevity of the genre in the modern gaming context. Squaresoft in the 90s was coming out with amazing JRPGs every 6 months or so, and by the end of that decade, we'd get Xenogears, Final Fantasy VII and Tactics, Secret of Mana, Chrono Trigger, Parasite Eve, and in the year 2000, Final Fantasy IX and Vagrant Story. I would love to see this happen again, and if it did, it would be the shot in the arm the genre needs to stay relevant in the long term. Those old games are fantastic, but they are hard to convince someone unsure of the genre to play, and every genre needs players to stay relevant. Modern re-releases do include workarounds for some of these issues, like removing random encounters, speeding up sluggish progression. The way the Final Fantasy remasters do this is fantastic. It's a damn shame that JRPGs aren't as popular as I feel they should be. It's one of my favorite genres, and I love playing through as many high-quality ones as I can get my hands on. JRPGs are the only gaming genre to feature truly magical worlds and stories. Games in this genre are special, and they deserve more attention than they typically receive. What do you think of JRPGs? Have you been interested in trying them, but some elements always hold you back? And if you love JRPGs like I do, what are your all-time favorites? Let me know in the comments below, and if you like this video, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and ding that bell for more really good gaming content. Regardless of what you choose to do, make sure you have a great day, gamers.